Every Sunday at exactly 7, my daughter video called us without fail. She hadn't missed once in 8 years, so when the screen stayed dark, I knew something was wrong. My wife looked at me and whispered, "Maybe she's just running late." I called anyway, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I called my son-in-law. He answered too quickly. "She's visiting a friend," he said. "Can I talk to her?" I asked. After a long silence, he replied, "She's not here right now." That was when I grabbed my truck keys. If this story is already pulling at your heart, I'm grateful you're here. Tell me in the comments, what city or country are you watching from today? I'd love to know how far these stories travel. And a quick note, some elements of this story are fictionalized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to actual names or places is coincidental, but the message behind it is one worth carrying with you. Every Sunday at 7 o'clock in the evening, my daughter called without fail. For 8 years, that video call came in like the tied, steady, reliable something I'd built my whole week around, without ever realizing it. I'm Raymond Caldwell, 67 years old, retired plumber, living in a tan-colored ranch house on Sycamore Court in Cartersville, Georgia. I spent 40 years crawling under houses, fixing busted pipes, tracing water damage back to its source. My hands are rough and my knees ache when it rains, but I wake up every morning grateful for the quiet life my wife Maggie and I have built together. Maggie is 64, soft-spoken, and has flour on her hands more often than not. Every Saturday, she bakes peach cobblers and lemon pound cakes to sell at the farmer's market on Main Street. She says baking keeps her sane. I say it keeps the whole neighborhood happy. Our daughter, Claire Caldwell Foster, 35 years old, 4th grade teacher at Pine Ridge Elementary in Marietta, has called us every Sunday at 7 sharp since Gracie was born 9 years ago. Rain or shine, sick or well-tired or wide awake, that call came through. Claire would prop the phone against the fruit bowl on her kitchen counter, and Gracie would climb into the frame and talk my ear off about her spelling tests and her best friend and whatever book she'd been reading that week. That Sunday in October felt like any other Sunday when it started. Maggie had pot roast in the slow cooker, and the whole house smelled like garlic and rosemary. I was in my recliner watching the Braves wrap up their season, and Maggie kept walking past me to check on the food, patting my shoulder each time like she'd done for 43 years of marriage. "Claire's going to tell us about the fall carnival," Maggie called from the kitchen. "Gracie's class had a booth this year. She's been so excited." "I know," I called back. "She texted me a picture of the decorations on Thursday." 7 o'clock came. I muted the television and picked up my phone, setting it on the coffee table where we always took the call together, Maggie pulling her chair close, both of us leaning in like a couple of teenagers waiting for something good. 7:05. Nothing. "Maybe she's running a few minutes late," Maggie said, smoothing her apron. "Maybe," I said. 7:15. I picked up the phone and dialed Claire's number myself. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Claire's voice, bright and familiar. "Hi, you've reached Claire. Leave me a message and I'll call you right back." "Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Just checking in. Give us a call when you get a chance." I set the phone down. Maggie brought 2 bowls of pot roast to the coffee table and sat beside me. "She's probably just caught up with something," Maggie said, handing me a fork. "You know how Gracie is on Sunday evenings, takes forever to wind down for the school week." "Yeah," I said. "You're right." But I tried again at 7:30, and the call went straight to voicemail without even ringing. Phone turned off or in another room, or I didn't finish the thought. At 7:45, I tried a different number. Brandon's cell. He picked up on the second ring. "Paul," he said, smooth, easy, like a man who'd been expecting a call he'd already prepared for. I frowned. "It's Raymond, Claire's dad. Right, sorry, Ray. Hey, what's up? We were supposed to video call Claire at 7. She's not picking up. Everything okay up there? Oh yeah, totally. A half-second pause so short I almost missed it. Claire headed out this afternoon to visit a friend. I think she forgot to call. You know how she gets when she's catching up with people. I gripped the phone a little tighter. Which friend? Someone from the school. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. Another pause. I'll have her call you when she gets back, okay? Probably late tonight. Where's Gracie? She's here with me. We're good. Don't worry. Can I talk to her? She's in the bath right now. I'll have Claire call you, Ray. Don't stress. He hung up before I could say another word. I sat holding the phone, the pot roast going cold in my lap. Maggie was watching me the way she does when she already knows something is wrong, but hasn't said it out loud yet. What did he say? She asked. He said Claire went to visit a friend. Maggie's fork paused over her bowl. Which friend? He didn't know the name. She set the fork down completely. Claire tells us everything, Ray. She would have mentioned a Sunday trip. I know. And she would never miss the call without texting first. Not once in 8 years. I know Maggie. I looked at the phone in my hand, then at the dark television screen, then at the front door, like I was already thinking about getting in the truck. In 40 years of plumbing, I learned one thing above everything else. A pipe doesn't just stop flowing without a reason. Something blocks it, something breaks it, something goes wrong upstream. You don't ignore the silence. You trace it back to the source. I'm going to call again in an hour, I said. If she doesn't pick up, I'll figure out the next step in the morning. Maggie nodded, but her hands were wrapped tight around her bowl knuckles pale, and neither one of us touched our food again. The clock on the microwave read 2:14 in the morning when I finally gave up pretending I was going to sleep. I'd lain in bed for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling, while Maggie's breathing evened out beside me. She'd fallen asleep with her hand resting on my arm, the way she does when she's worried, but doesn't want to say so out loud. I'd waited until I was sure she was deep under, before I eased out from under the covers, pulled on my flannel shirt, and padded down the hall to the kitchen in my socks. I put a pot of coffee on the real kind, not the decaf Maggie had been trying to switch me to since my last checkup, and sat down at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me. No missed calls, no texts, nothing from Claire. I tried her number one more time. Straight to voicemail, same as before. I didn't leave a message this time, just sat there listening to her voice on the recording. Hi, you've reached Claire, leave me a message and I'll call you right back, and let it run all the way to the beep before I hung up. The kitchen was quiet, except for the coffee maker gurgling and the hum of the refrigerator. On the wall above the stove, there's a framed photo Maggie put up years ago. Claire, at maybe 8 years old, sitting on a stack of PVC pipe in my old work truck, wearing my hard hat and grinning so big her eyes had nearly disappeared. I looked at that photo for a long time. She used to come with me on jobs during summer break. Not to help she was too young for that, but because she hated staying home alone, and I didn't have the heart to say no. She'd sit in the truck or perch somewhere safe and ask me questions the entire time. Why does water pressure drop when 2 faucets run at once? Why does the hot water take so long to reach the upstairs bathroom? Why does a pipe make that knocking sound at night? Because hot water expands the pipe, I'd tell her. And when it cools down, the pipe contracts. That knocking sound is the pipe settling back into place. She'd nod like I'd handed her something valuable. So it's just talking, she said once. The house is just talking. Something like that, I'd said. She became a teacher instead of a plumber. Said she wanted to explain things to people the way I'd explained things to her. I told her that was the finest reason I'd ever heard for choosing a profession. The coffee finished brewing, and I poured myself a mug, then sat back down and let my mind go to the place I'd been keeping it away from all evening. Brandon Foster. I'd never warmed to the man. Not in 10 years of Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and Gracie's birthday parties. He was handsome in a way that felt rehearsed, the kind of man who always seemed to be performing for an audience even when the room was empty. He sold real estate, which I'd always thought suited him. He was good at making things look better than they were. Claire loved him. Or she had in the beginning. But over the last year, maybe longer if I was honest, something had shifted in her voice on our Sunday calls. She still laughed, still asked about the garden and Maggie's baking and whether I'd fixed the leak in the garage, but underneath all of that, there was a tightness that hadn't been there before. Like a water line running at too much pressure. You can't always see it from the outside, but you can hear it if you know what to listen for. 3 months ago, during a call in July, I'd asked her directly, "You doing okay, sweetheart? You sound tired." "I'm fine, Dad," she'd said a little too quickly. "Just a long week." I hadn't pushed. Maybe I should have. And then there was the visit last month. I'd driven up to Marietta on a Saturday to help Claire install a new showerhead. Brandon had apparently tried to do it himself, and cross-threaded the fitting, which told me everything I needed to know about the man's competence with anything practical. While I was working under the bathroom sink, Claire had leaned in the doorway to talk to me, and I'd noticed a yellowing bruise on the inside of her right wrist. She'd caught me looking and pulled her sleeve down fast. "Bumped into a cabinet," she'd said, smiling. I'd let it go. The thought of it now at 2 a.m. with cold linoleum under my socks made my stomach turn over hard. "Ray." Maggie's voice came soft from the hallway. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in her bathrobe. Hair loose around her shoulders, eyes heavy with interrupted sleep. "Come back to bed, honey." "Can't sleep," I said. She came and sat across from me, reaching over the table to put her hand on mine. Her fingers were warm. "You're thinking about Brandon," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm thinking about Claire," I said. "She's fine," Maggie said, but her voice wobbled just slightly on the last word, and we both heard it. Maggie. I turned my hand over and held hers properly. "If I call Pine Ridge Elementary first thing in the morning, and they tell me Claire took a personal day, a planned absence, a leave request, anything official, I will let this go. I will sit here and drink my decaf and wait for her to call." Maggie's fingers tightened around mine. "And if they say she didn't," I looked at the photo of Claire in my hard hat on the kitchen wall. 8 years old, grinning like the world was a puzzle she couldn't wait to solve. "Then I'm getting in the truck," I said. Maggie didn't argue. She just held my hand tighter, and we sat together in the quiet kitchen while the coffee went cold between us, waiting for morning to come. The sun was barely over the tree line when I heard Maggie moving around in the kitchen. I dozed off somewhere around 4 a.m, chin against my chest and the recliner phone still in my hand. By 6:30, I was up, face-washed, coffee poured, sitting at the kitchen table watching the clock, the way I used to watch a pressure gauge on a tricky job, steady, patient, waiting for the needle to move. Maggie set a plate of toast in front of me without a word. I ate 2 bites. She ate none of hers. At 7:55, I picked up my phone. "Pine Ridge opens at 8, I said. "I know," Maggie said. She sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table like she was bracing for something. At 8 o'clock exactly, I dialed the school's main number. It rang twice before a woman picked up, her voice bright and practiced. "Pine Ridge Elementary, this is Carol speaking. How can I help you?" "Good morning, Carol. My name is Raymond Caldwell. My daughter is Claire Foster. She teaches 4th grade. I'm trying to confirm she put in a leave request for this week." A short pause. Keys clicking in the background. Foster. Claire Foster, yes. Let me just pull that up for you. More clicking. Then a longer pause, the kind that made my jaw tighten. Sir, I'm showing that Mrs. Foster has been absent since last Wednesday, but I don't have any leave request on file. No personal day, no sick leave, nothing submitted through the system. The toast in my stomach turned to concrete. Nothing at all, I said. No, sir. Her class has had a substitute since Wednesday morning. We've been trying to reach her directly, but haven't gotten a response. Is everything okay? I'm not sure yet, I said. Thank you, Carol. I set the phone face down on the table. Maggie was watching me, her hands still folded, knuckles white. She didn't put in leave, I said. Maggie's breath came out shaky and thin. Wednesday, she said. Ray, that's 5 days. I know. She's been gone 5 days, and the school doesn't even know where she is. Maggie pressed both hands flat against the table like she needed something solid under her. Ray, what is happening? I don't know yet, I said. But I'm going to find out. I was already up, moving toward the bedroom. I pulled my work boots from the closet, old habit, I always think clearer with the right shoes on, and sat on the edge of the bed to lace them up. Maggie appeared in the doorway, arms crossed tight over her chest. I'm coming with you. No. I said it gently, but I said it firm. I need you here, Maggie. If Claire calls this number, if anyone calls, I need you to answer. You're my backup. Her chin trembled. I hate this. I know you do. I stood up and crossed the room and kissed her forehead, held her face in both hands for a second. I'll call you the minute I know something. I promise. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, my phone, and the small toolbox I keep in the truck, out of 40 years of habit. Before I backed out of the driveway, I tried Brandon's number one more time. He picked up on the third ring. His voice was different from last night, tighter, like a man who hadn't slept well and was irritated about it. Ray, he said, not a question. Brandon, Claire didn't file any leave at the school. She's been gone since Wednesday with no explanation. I need to know what's going on. A beat. I told you she's visiting. Which friend, Brandon? My voice came out harder than I intended. Give me a name. Give me a phone number. Give me something. Another pause, longer this time, and I could hear him breathing. Look, Paul. I really think you need to calm down and let Claire. I went cold all over. My name is Ray, I said slowly. Raymond Caldwell. You've called me Paul twice now. Who is Paul Brandon? The line went dead. I sat in my driveway with the engine idling, staring at the phone in my hand. In 40 years of plumbing, when a repair job looked straightforward on the surface but something kept nagging at the back of my neck, I learned to trust that nagging. Brandon Foster had just called me the wrong name twice. A man who'd been my son-in-law for 10 years. A man who knew my name as well as he knew his own. People don't mix up names by accident. They mix them up when their mind is somewhere else entirely. I put the truck in reverse and headed for the highway. 40 minutes on. 75 south felt like 4 hours. I kept the radio off. Just me and the hum of the engine, and the white lines blurring past mile after mile of Georgia pine trees, giving way to strip malls and subdivisions as Cartersville faded behind me and the Atlanta metro crept in around the edges. I'd made this drive dozens of times over the years. Birthdays, Thanksgivings, the Saturday last spring when Claire's kitchen faucet started leaking behind the wall and Brandon's solution had been to put a bucket under the cabinet and call it fine. This time the drive felt different. Every stoplight felt like a waste of time I didn't have. I turned onto Birchwood Lane at 9:27 by the clock on my dash. It's a quiet street ranch, houses set back from the road, big oak trees dropping leaves across the sidewalks, the kind of neighborhood where people put American flags on their porches and wave at the mail carrier by name. I'd always liked it. Felt like a good place to raise a kid. I slowed the truck as I approached number 224. The house sat still and closed in a way that made my chest tighten immediately. Every curtain pulled. Front porch light still on from the night before, burning pale in the morning sun. And in the driveway, Claire's blue Honda Civic parked exactly where it always sat. I pulled to the curb across the street and cut the engine. Claire's car was here. Brandon had told me she drove to visit a friend out of town, but her car hadn't moved. My heart knocked hard against my ribs as I climbed out of the truck. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the house the way I used to look at a job site before I started taking stock. Reading the details, noticing what didn't add up. 3 newspapers lay on the front walkway, their plastic sleeves dark with morning dew. Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. Nobody had picked them up in 5 days. The flower box under the front window, Claire filled it with yellow mums every October, tended them every single morning, was wilted brown, every stem drooping over the edge, like something that had given up waiting. Claire watered those flowers every day without fail. She told me once it was how she started her mornings. A little bit of routine, she said, keeps the whole day steady. I walked across the street and up the front path. Knocked 3 times solid. The sound echoed in the quiet neighborhood, and a dog barked somewhere down the block, but nothing moved inside the house. Claire. My voice came out rough. I cleared my throat and tried again, louder. Claire, it's Dad. Open the door. Nothing. I knocked again, harder, my knuckles stinging against the painted wood. Gracie, sweetheart, it's Grandpa Ray. The dog down the street kept barking. A squirrel ran across the gutter overhead. Inside the house, nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no television. I stepped off the porch and walked around to the garage. The side door was locked. I cupped my hands against the small window and looked in. Claire's Civic sat in the near bay. The far bay was empty. Brandon's black Chevy Tahoe was gone. I went back to the front door and stood there with my hand in my jacket pocket, fingers closing around my keyring. 2 years ago, when Claire and Brandon had replaced all the locks after a neighbor's house got broken into, Claire had pressed a spare key into my hand at Sunday dinner. Just in case, Dad, she'd said, quiet enough that Brandon couldn't hear from the living room. You never know. I'd put it on my key ring that same night and never taken it off. I slid the key into the deadbolt. It turned smooth and clean, and the door swung open. The smell hit me first, stale air, the particular staleness of a house that had been shut up tight for days with the heat running. Underneath it, something else. Takeout food gone cold, the faint, sour edge of a trash can that needed emptying. The living room looked almost normal at first glance. Couch, coffee table, Gracie's school drawings still tacked to the corkboard by the stairs. But I'd been in enough houses over the years to know when something had been straightened in a hurry. The throw pillows were lined up too perfectly. The magazines on the coffee table were stacked at a precise right angle, the kind of precise that comes from someone trying too hard. A single crayon purple, Gracie's favorite color, lay on the carpet near the base of the couch, too far from the coffee table to have just rolled there. I moved to the kitchen. The sink held 2 days of dishes crusting over in the basin. The counters had been wiped down recently. I could smell the cleaning spray, but whoever wiped them had done it fast and missed the corner by the stove. I opened the refrigerator. Beer. Leftover Chinese food in white containers. A half-gallon of milk with an expiration date of last Wednesday. No juice boxes, no Go-Gurt, No grapes or apple slices in little snack bags, with Gracie's name written on them in Claire's handwriting. Nothing a 9-year-old girl would eat. I stood in the middle of that kitchen, with the refrigerator humming behind me, and something cold and heavy settling into my chest. Then I looked down. Under the sink where I'd installed new shut-off valves for Claire 2 summers back was the household water meter, a small analog gauge, the kind that measures flow through the main line. I crouched down and looked at it the way I'd looked at 10,000 meters over 40 years. The dial was moving. Slowly, steadily, but moving. Water was flowing somewhere in this house right now. I straightened up and stood very still. And that's when I heard it, a sound faint and low rising through the floor beneath my feet. I stood in the middle of Claire's kitchen and held my breath. The sound came again, low muffled, rising through the linoleum floor like a vibration more than a noise. Not footsteps, not the house settling. Something deliberate. Something that started and stopped with a rhythm that didn't belong to pipes or appliances or anything mechanical. I looked down at the water meter under the sink again. The dial was still turning, slow and steady the way it turns when someone somewhere in the house has a faucet cracked open, just enough to keep a trickle running. In 40 years of plumbing, I'd read thousands of those dials. A house with nobody in it doesn't use water. Refrigerators don't pull from the main line. The dishwasher wasn't running. I could see the washing machine through the laundry room door, lid up, empty, dry. But that dial was moving. My legs carried me to the far end of the kitchen before my brain fully caught up. Behind the refrigerator, set into the wall at an angle most people would never notice, was a door. Painted the same off-white as the surrounding drywall, no knob, just a flat metal pull handle. I'd installed a new door sweep on it 2 summers ago when Claire complained about cold air coming up from the basement. The door had a padlock on it now. Not the original latch, a heavy-duty combination padlock, the kind you buy at a hardware store, still bright silver, no rust, no weathering. Brand new, installed recently. My stomach dropped straight to the floor. I pressed my palm flat against the door. The wood was cool under my hand. I leaned my ear against the painted surface and closed my eyes, filtering out the refrigerator hum, the furnace clicking, the neighborhood sounds bleeding in through the walls. Breathing. Slow and shallow, but breathing. Someone was on the other side of that door. My throat seized up so hard I couldn't speak for a moment. I swallowed twice, forced air into my lungs, and knocked gently with 2 knuckles. Claire. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Claire, baby, it's Dad. Nothing. Then a sharp intake of breath from the other side. Like someone who'd been holding themselves very still, had just heard something that cracked them open. I thought of something then. Something so old I hadn't thought about it in years. When Claire was 6 years old, we used to play hide and seek on Sunday afternoons. She was small enough to squeeze into the tightest spaces behind the water heater in the garage, inside the lower cabinet under the bathroom sink, underneath the back porch, between the foundation blocks. When I got close to finding her, she'd give herself away every time. Not by moving or making a sound, but by knocking. 3 slow knocks on whatever surface was nearest to her. Our signal. Her way of saying, I'm here, Daddy. You're warm. Keep looking. I raised my fist and knocked on that basement door. 3 times. Slow. Pause. The silence stretched out for 5 full seconds. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my back teeth. Then, from the other side of the door, 3 knocks. Slow. Pause. I grabbed the padlock with both hands and pulled. It held fast quality hardware, a solid shackle. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the refrigerator door to steady myself, and the shaking made me furious because I needed my hands right now. I needed them working. Claire. I pressed my mouth close to the doorframe. I hear you. I am right here. I'm going to get this door open. Do you understand me? I am not leaving this house without you. From the other side, muffled and hoarse, and the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in 67 years of living, my daughter's voice. Dad. Just that. Just the one word, and it broke into pieces on the way out, like she'd been saving it up for 5 days, and it had gotten too heavy to carry whole. I was already running for the front door. My toolbox sat behind the passenger seat of the truck, right where it had lived for 40 years. I yanked open the truck door so hard it bounced on its hinges, dragged the box out, flipped the latches. My hands found the bolt cutters by feel 18-inch Channellock good steel tool I'd owned since 1987. I also grabbed the heavy flathead screwdriver and the adjustable wrench, shoved them in my back pocket, and ran back inside. At the basement door, I examined the padlock fast and close. Master lock, hardened shackle, the kind rated against bolt cutters on the packaging. But the packaging was written by marketing people, not plumbers. I positioned the bolt cutter jaws around the shackle, set my feet shoulder-width apart, the way I'd stood on job sites my whole life, and squeezed with everything I had. My shoulders screamed. My lower back sent up a flare. The shackle groaned and snapped. The padlock hit the kitchen floor with a sound like a gunshot and bounced twice before spinning to a stop against the baseboard. I grabbed the pull handle and wrenched the basement door open. The smell came first. Damp, concrete, old wood, the particular staleness of a space that had been sealed up tight with not enough air cycling through. And underneath all of it, something that made my chest cave in completely. The faint chemical smell of a portable camping toilet, the kind you buy at Bass Pro Shops for hunting trips. Someone had thought to give her that much at least. I hit the light switch at the top of the stairs. A single bare bulb flickered on, throwing weak yellow light down the wooden steps. Claire. My voice cracked down the middle. I'm coming down. Dad. Her voice floated up from the far corner, rough and papery like dry leaves dragged across concrete. Dad, please hurry. I went down those stairs faster than a 67-year-old man with bad knees should move, gripping the railing so hard the wood bit into my palm. The basement was unfinished concrete floor, exposed joists overhead, the water heater and furnace taking up the near wall. A camping lantern sat on the floor in the far corner, its battery light throwing a pale blue circle. And in that circle, sitting with her back against the concrete wall, knees pulled to her chest, was my daughter. Claire's hair was tangled and matted at the back, where she'd been lying against the wall. Her face was pale in a way that had nothing to do with the bad lighting, a grayish, papery pallor that comes from 5 days without proper food or sunlight. Her wrists had red marks, ringing them raw and angry-looking, where zip ties had been, and had apparently been removed at some point. Her eyes found me the second I hit the bottom step, and they were, I don't have better words for it, they were shattered and whole at the same time. Like someone who'd been holding themselves together through sheer willpower for so long that seeing a familiar face undid every single knot at once. Dad. Her voice dissolved completely on the word, and she pressed both hands over her mouth, shoulders shaking. I crossed that basement floor in 4 steps and dropped to my knees in front of her, and my bad knees hit concrete hard enough that the pain shot straight up to my hips, and I did not care even slightly. I've got you. I pulled her into my arms, and she came apart. Not quietly, she sobbed out loud, the kind of crying that has been dammed up too long, and comes out jagged and convulsive, her whole body shaking against my chest. Her fingers dug into the back of my flannel shirt and held on with a grip that surprised me because she felt so thin, but her hands were desperate strong. I've got you, sweetheart. I've got you. You're safe. He's not here. You're safe. I heard you. She choked out against my shoulder. I heard you walk in upstairs. I heard the refrigerator open. I tried to make noise, but I was so scared he'd come back. I didn't know if it was you or... She couldn't finish the sentence. It's me, I said. It's just me, nobody else. I held her and let her cry, and didn't say anything else for a long moment. Just kept one hand on the back of her head, the way I had when she was small and had nightmares, and felt her breathing slowly, slowly begin to even out. Then I pulled back enough to look at her face properly. Her lips were cracked and dry. A healing scrape ran along her left cheekbone. Her eyes were sunken, the skin beneath them bruised, dark purple with exhaustion. How long? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. How long has he had you down here? Since Wednesday night. She wiped her face with both hands, wincing when her palm passed over the scrape. He came home with someone. A woman. They were arguing in the kitchen, and then he came down here and She stopped jaw working. He said he needed me to sign some papers about the house. I said no, and he put me down here. He said it would only be a day or two until I changed my mind. What papers? Transfer papers. He wanted to put the house in his name only. Her voice hardened around the edges, grief crystallizing into something sharper. I told him I'd call a lawyer. That's when he locked the door. I brushed the hair back from her face with both hands the way I'd done 1,000 times when she was small. My eyes were burning, and I was not going to cry yet because I needed to stay functional for the next 10 minutes. Okay, I said. Okay, can you walk? I think so. She pressed her hand against the wall and started to push herself up. Her legs shook badly, and I got my arm around her waist and took most of her weight without making a thing of it. We made it up 3 steps before she grabbed my arm hard and stopped. Dad. Her voice dropped to something urgent and raw. Where's Gracie? Brandon said he sent her to his mother's in Savannah, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know if she's okay. Her fingers dug into my forearm hard enough to bruise. Ray. Where is my daughter? The bottom dropped out of my stomach. In all the terror and the relief of the last 10 minutes, I had not gone upstairs. I had not checked the bedrooms. I had come straight to the kitchen, straight to the basement door, straight to Claire. Gracie. I did not know where Gracie was. I looked at my daughter's face, the desperation cracking through the exhaustion, the way her whole body had gone rigid, waiting for my answer, and I said the only true thing I had. I'm going to find her right now, I said. Stay here. And I took the stairs 2 at a time. The stairs groaned under my boots as I took them 2 at a time. Claire called up after me from the bottom of the staircase, her voice thin and urgent. Gracie's room is on the right. The door with the butterfly sticker on it. I already knew which door. I'd painted that room with Claire 3 years ago, pale yellow, her choice, Gracie's choice, the 2 of them debating shades for 45 minutes at the Home Depot paint counter while I stood there holding color swatches and trying not to laugh. The hallway upstairs was dim, all the bedroom doors closed. I pushed open the first door on the right. The butterfly sticker was there. A big purple monarch slightly peeling at one corner the way stickers do when a kid picks at them out of habit. Gracie's room was tidy in the specific way that a child keeps a room tidy. Stuffed animals arranged on the bed with internal logic that only made sense to a 9-year-old, library books stacked on the nightstand with a bookmark sticking out of the top one, a half-finished friendship bracelet on the dresser with the strands still attached to a safety pin stuck into a throw pillow. The curtains were drawn, the room dim and still. No Gracie. Gracie. I kept my voice low and steady, the way I used to talk to Claire when she was small and frightened, not loud, not sharp, just present. "Sweetheart, it's Grandpa Ray. It's okay. You can come out now." Nothing moved. I stood in the center of the room and thought about what Claire had told me downstairs. Brandon told her he'd sent Gracie to his mother's in Savannah. But Claire hadn't believed it. And standing in this room, looking at the friendship bracelet still half finished on the dresser, looking at the library books with the bookmark still inside, I didn't believe it either. You don't leave mid-project. Not at 9 years old. Not when you're in the middle of something. I thought about the milk in the refrigerator expired Wednesday. I thought about the water meter dial still turning. And I thought about Claire at 6 years old, crammed into the cabinet under the bathroom sink, knocking 3 times so I could find her. I crossed to the bed, crouched down, and lifted the bedskirt. The space under the bed was dark. For one terrible second I saw nothing, and my heart seized so hard I actually pressed my fist against my sternum. Then I saw 2 eyes, small, dark-looking, straight back at me from the far corner under the bed frame, barely visible, behind a tumble of shoeboxes and a deflated soccer ball and what looked like a rolled-up sleeping bag. Wide eyes, terrified eyes, but open and blinking and alive. Gracie. My voice broke clean in half on her name. Baby girl. It's Grandpa Ray. A sound came from under the bed. Not words, just a small, high-cracked noise that I recognized as a child, trying very hard not to cry out loud and failing at the last second. Then she was moving, scrambling forward on her hands and knees, shoeboxes scattering sideways, and I pulled the bedskirt up higher, and she came out from under that bed and slammed into my chest so hard I rocked back on my heels. She weighed almost nothing. She felt like a bundle of sticks and cold skin, and she was shaking so violently I could feel it in my back teeth. Her arms went around my neck, and she held on with everything she had, face buried against my shoulder, and she cried, not quietly, not politely, but with her whole body, the kind of crying that comes from a child who has been terrified and alone and holding herself together through sheer, stubborn will for days and days, and has finally reached the person she was waiting for. "I've got you," I said into her hair. My throat was so tight the words came out barely above a whisper. "Grandpa's got you. You're safe. You're safe, sweetheart." "I waited," she choked out between sobs. "Mom said you'd come. She said if something really bad happened, you'd come." I waited, and I counted, and I waited. I know. I was rocking her without realizing it the way you do with small children when there are no adequate words. "You did so good. You did everything exactly right." She pulled back just enough to look at my face. Her cheeks were streaked, and her lips were cracked dry, and she had a smear of what looked like peanut butter on her chin from some earlier attempt at feeding herself. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Then she shoved something at me hard, pressing it against my chest with both hands. A tablet. The screen cracked in one corner, the case covered in stickers. Llamas and rainbows, and one sticker that said 4th grade rocks. I recorded it," Gracie said. Her voice was raw and hoarse. "Grandpa, I recorded everything. I didn't know what else to do, so I hid the tablet under my pillow first, and then I pushed it under the bed with me, and I just let it record. I thought you would want to know what happened." I looked at the tablet in my hands. The screen showed a long audio file, 47 minutes, timestamp from Wednesday evening. Gracie. I cupped her face in both my hands, dirt, and all cracked lips, and tear-streaked cheeks, and peanut butter and everything. "Do you know how smart you are?" She let out a wet, exhausted laugh that sounded like Claire at the same age. "Mom always says I get it from you." I tucked the tablet under my arm and stood up with Gracie still held against my side, one arm around her. Can you walk, sweetheart? Yes, she said. Then immediately, is Mom okay? I heard her. The first night I heard her through the floor. Mom is downstairs, I said. She's waiting for you. Gracie made another sound, relief and grief and exhaustion all compressed into one small noise, and held my hand so tightly as we went into the hallway that my knuckles ached. I didn't mind even slightly. At the top of the stairs, I looked at the tablet under my arm. 47 minutes. Whatever was on that recording, it had happened while Gracie lay under her bed in the dark alone and terrified, holding herself still waiting for me. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The 911 dispatcher's voice was calm and professional, the way they trained them to be. 911, what is your emergency? I need an ambulance at 224 Birchwood Lane in Marietta, I said, keeping my voice level while Gracie pressed against my side on the staircase. I have 2 people here, an adult female and a child 9 years old, both showing signs of dehydration and malnutrition. They've been confined without adequate food or water for approximately 5 days. A pause. Keys clicking. Sir, are they conscious and breathing? Yes. Both conscious, both breathing. No immediate life-threatening injuries that I can see, but they need medical attention now. Units are on the way. Stay on the line with me, sir. Can you tell me your name? Raymond Caldwell. I'm the father and grandfather. Mr. Caldwell is the person who confined them still on the premises. No. The house appears to be empty except for the 2 victims and myself. At the bottom of the stairs, Claire was sitting on the second step back against the wall, Gracie now pulled into her lap, with both arms wrapped around her. Claire was crying into the top of Gracie's head, rocking her slightly, and Gracie had her face buried in her mother's neck, and her small shoulders were heaving. I sat on the step beside them and put my arm around Claire's shoulders, and just stayed there, the 3 of us on those stairs together, while I kept the dispatcher on the line, and watched my daughter hold her child, and thought, you're both alive. You're both here. Everything else can wait. The ambulance arrived in 11 minutes. I counted. 2 paramedics came through the front door. I'd left open, a young woman with her hair pulled back, and a heavy-set man who moved with the calm efficiency of someone who'd been doing this a long time. They assessed Claire first, then Gracie, their movements practiced and precise, calling out numbers to each other in the shorthand of people who work emergencies for a living. Moderate dehydration, the woman said, fitting a blood pressure cuff around Claire's arm. BP is low. She needs fluids. The little one's the same, the man said, checking Gracie's pulse at her wrist. Heart rate's elevated. How long did you say they were down there? 5 days, I said. Claire was in the basement. Gracie was upstairs in her room, hiding under the bed. The man looked at Gracie with an expression that went briefly visibly soft before the professional mask came back. Under the bed, all by herself. She was waiting for me, I said. They loaded Claire and Gracie into the ambulance together, I asked. And the young paramedic said yes without hesitation, bending the protocol without making a thing of it, and I was grateful to her for that in a way I couldn't properly express. I rode in the front while they worked in the back, and I called Maggie. She picked up before the first ring finished. Ray. Her voice was wound so tight it could have snapped. Ray, what's happening? I've been sitting here for... I found them, I said. Maggie, I found them. They're both alive. We're in the ambulance going to Wellstar Kennestone right now. The sound Maggie made then, I don't have words for it. It was not a word or a sentence. It was 43 years of marriage compressed into one exhale, grief and relief and love all tangled together into something that hurt to hear. I'll be there, she said, voice cracked wide open. I'm leaving right now. Don't you move, Raymond Caldwell. Sristu, I'm not going anywhere, I said. At Wellstar Kennestone Hospital, they were ready for us. Claire and Gracie were taken straight through to the emergency bay, IV lines going in monitors, beeping a pediatric nurse appearing from somewhere specifically for Gracie, and talking to her in a low, cheerful voice about what flavor of popsicle she wanted while she worked. I stood against the wall and watched them and breathed. I was still standing there 20 minutes later when a man in a gray sport coat came through the ER doors and stopped at the nurse's station, showing credentials. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, broad through the shoulders, with the look of a man who'd seen enough difficult things that his face had settled into a permanent expression of careful attention. He scanned the room, found me, and walked over. Mr. Caldwell. He extended his hand. Detective Sam Pruitt, Cobb County. I caught the call from the ambulance dispatch. Can we talk? I shook his hand. You can ask me whatever you need. Pruitt pulled out a small notebook, uncapped a pen. Tell me what you found at the house. Everything start to finish. I told him. All of it, the water meter, the padlock, the knock signal, the basement, Claire's condition, Gracie under the bed, the tablet. Where is it now? He asked. I pulled it from my jacket pocket and held it out. 47 minutes of audio, recorded Wednesday evening. Pruitt looked at the tablet the way a man looks at something that might change everything. He reached for it carefully, then stopped. You haven't listened to it yet. No, I said. I was a little busy. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Brandon Foster. My jaw tightened so hard my back teeth ached. Pruitt saw my face and raised one hand, wait. He pulled out his own phone and opened a recording app, held it close to mine, and nodded. I answered and put it on speaker. Brandon, I said. His voice came through sharp and hard. All the smoothness from Sunday night burned away completely. What did you do? That's my house, Ray. You had no right to go in there. Claire is my wife and Gracie is my daughter, and you had absolutely no right. Your wife, I said carefully, is currently receiving intravenous fluids in the emergency room at Wellstar Kennestone. Your daughter was hiding under her bed for 5 days, eating crackers and drinking from the bathroom sink. Dead air. 3 full seconds of it. Then Brandon's voice came back, and it had changed again, flatter, now calculated, a man recalibrating. I want to talk to my lawyer. He did not ask if Claire was okay. He did not ask if Gracie was frightened. He did not ask what hospital, which room, how serious. He asked for his lawyer. Pruitt was already writing in his notebook, and the look on his face told me everything I needed to know about where this was going. Before I press play on that 47-minute recording, and trust me, what Brandon said on it will shock you, drop a number in the comments right now. Any number. Just so I know you're still here with me. And a quick note, the story ahead contains some fictionalized elements. If that's not for you, this is a good place to step away. No hard feelings. Pruitt led me to a small consultation room at the end of the ER hallway, the kind of room hospitals keep for difficult conversations, with 2 chairs, a small table, and a box of tissues nobody wanted to acknowledge was there. He set the tablet on the table between us and looked at me. You sure you want to hear this? She's my daughter, I said. Play it. Pruitt tapped the audio file. The recording opened with silence, then the muffled sound of fabric shifting, a small, careful exhale, and Gracie's voice barely above a whisper. I'm under the bed. I'm really scared. Mom said wait for Grandpa Ray, so that's what I'm doing. My throat closed so completely I couldn't have spoken if I'd tried. I pressed my fist hard against my mouth and kept my eyes on the table. The recording continued. Gracie's breathing, slow, controlled, a 9-year-old, trying very hard to be quiet and still. Then, after several minutes, the sound of a door opening somewhere in the house. Footsteps on hardwood. 2 sets. A woman's voice came through the tablet speaker, sharp and tense. "Brandon, this is insane. We cannot just leave her down there." Brandon's voice smoother than I'd heard it in years. The real estate agent voice, the voice designed to make people feel like everything was fine. "Tara, I need you to calm down, okay? This is temporary." Temporary. The woman Tara let out a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob. "She's been down there since last night. Brandon, I'm 3 months along. I can't be involved in something like this." Pruitt glanced at me. I kept my eyes on the tablet and my fist against my mouth. "You're already involved," Brandon said, voice cooling. "That ship sailed the minute you helped me change the locks. So let's stay focused. The house goes on the market November 15th. Once the sale closes, we're done with Georgia. New life, fresh start. That's what you wanted." "I wanted a divorce," Tara said, voice cracking. "I didn't want this. She has a little girl, Brandon. Gracie is right upstairs." "Gracie is fine. She's probably asleep. You don't know that. You haven't checked." A pause. Then Brandon's voice and something in it had shifted, quieter, more deliberate, the way a man sounds when he's made a decision and stopped negotiating. "Claire will sign the transfer papers. She just needs a few more days to understand she doesn't have another option. Once she signs, we call 911, say we came home and found her like this, and she's too scared to say otherwise. Clean. Simple." And if she doesn't sign, Brandon didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched out for 4 full seconds on the recording. "She'll sign," he said. Tara made a small, distressed sound. "What does that mean, Brandon? What does that mean if she doesn't?" "It means she'll sign," he repeated. 3 more days. Then we move to the next step and report her missing. By the time anyone starts asking real questions, we're in Colorado, and the money's already moved. The recording continued for another 30 minutes. Tara pacing Brandon on his phone, a brief argument about dinner that felt so absurdly ordinary against everything else that it turned my stomach. Then footsteps heading toward the front door. The sound of a car starting in the driveway. Then silence, long and complete, broken only by Gracie's breathing under the bed, and once very faintly, a sound that might have been Claire knocking on the basement ceiling from below. Pruitt stopped the recording. The room was very quiet. I became aware that my hands were shaking, both of them flat on the table, trembling steadily, like I was running a current. I pressed them down harder and breathed through my nose. "He knew Gracie might be in the house," I said. My voice came out low and scraped raw. "Tara told him, and he said she was fine. He didn't check. He left her up there and walked out the front door." "Yes," Pruitt said. "He was going to move Claire somewhere else in 3 days." I looked up at him. "I got there 1 day before that." Pruitt held my gaze steady. "Mr. Caldwell, what you found today, the padlock, Claire's condition, this recording combined with Brandon's behavior on that phone call, that's enough for an arrest warrant on kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment charges. I'm going to step out and make some calls." He stood, then paused. "You did good today." "Real good." He left. I sat alone in that small room with the tablet on the table, and my shaking hands pressed flat, and thought about 3 more days. 1 day earlier, and Brandon would have moved her. 1 day later, and I would have been too late. I was still sitting there when my phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. "Ray, someone just texted my phone from a number I don't know. I don't understand what's happening. Please come out here." I found Maggie in the main waiting area near the ER entrance. She was standing by the window with her back to the room, both arms wrapped tight around herself, not the comfortable crossed arms of someone thinking, but the specific posture of a person trying to hold themselves together from the outside in. She'd driven 40 minutes from Cartersville, in what must have been record time. She still had her house keys in her hand, gripped so hard, the teeth were probably drawing marks into her palm. I said her name. She spun around and grabbed my arm with both hands before I could say anything else, the keys digging into my jacket sleeve, her eyes red-rimmed, and her face a pale I hadn't seen since her mother passed 11 years ago. "Ray, look at this." She shoved her phone at me with shaking hands. Not trembling, shaking the full body kind that comes from adrenaline and fear running too long with nowhere to go. "Tell me what this means. Tell me right now." I took the phone. The text had come from a number with an Atlanta area code not saved in her contacts, not anyone Maggie knew. I read it twice to make sure I was reading it correctly. "Your husband is very persistent. Tell him to stop talking to police and take his family home. Claire is already safe. There is no reason to make this more complicated than it needs to be. Think carefully about what matters most." My jaw tightened until the muscles along the back of my skull ached. I kept my face still. Maggie was watching me with the focused desperation of someone who needs the person in front of them to be steady, and I was not going to let her down on that. "When did this come in?" I asked. 10 minutes ago, right after I parked the car." Her voice was working hard to stay level and not quite getting there. "Ray, how does someone have my number? How do they know we're even here? I didn't tell anyone I was coming, I just got in the car and—" "Brandon has had your number for 10 years, I said. "He knows it the same way he knows mine." She absorbed that. "Is it him? Did he send it himself?" "The him or someone he called." I looked around the waiting area without making it obvious, a young mother with a toddler asleep in her lap, an older man in a Braves cap bent over a crossword, a teenage boy sprawled across 3 chairs with his mouth open. Nobody watching us. Nobody positioned wrong. "Come with me." I put my hand on her back and walked her down the hallway toward the consultation room, where Pruitt and I had listened to the recording. The hallway felt longer than it had an hour ago. Maggie walked close enough that her shoulder kept brushing mine, and I was glad of it. Pruitt was coming through the door from the opposite direction when we arrived, phone in hand, expression focused, in the way that told me he'd been making calls, and the calls had produced results. He looked at Maggie first, then at me, reading the situation in about 2 seconds. "Detective." I held out Maggie's phone. "My wife received this in the parking lot 10 minutes ago." Pruitt took the phone and read the message. Something moved across his face. Not surprise, not quite, but a sharpening, the look of a man whose picture of a case just got 1 size larger. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced an evidence bag. The man came to work prepared, which I was beginning to appreciate considerably, and held it open. "Fat Mrs. Caldwell, I need to hold on to this temporarily," he said, his voice shifting into something more measured, the voice he used when he needed people to trust him quickly. "We can trace the origin of a text even from a prepaid number if it was sent recently enough. The cell tower data alone can tell us a great deal. You'll have your phone back." Maggie looked at me. I nodded once. She dropped the phone into the bag, and I watched her hands shake as she pulled them back. "Oh, how do they know we're here?" Maggie asked Pruitt directly, her chin steadying as she asked it. That was Maggie, frightened, but not passive. Never passive. "Someone sent this the minute I pulled into the parking lot. Because Brandon Foster knows this hospital is where Claire and Gracie would be taken," Pruitt said. "He knows Raymond found them, and he's panicking." He sealed the evidence bag. "Mrs. Caldwell, I want you to hear something because I mean it. This message is good news for us. Someone who sends a text like this is not in control of their situation anymore. They're reacting. Panicking people make mistakes, and mistakes leave evidence. Maggie reached out and grabbed my hand with both of hers, squeezing hard enough that my knuckles popped, and I didn't pull back. Her grip was the grip of a woman who has been alone with her fear for 4 hours and has now found something solid. "Is my daughter safe right now?" she asked. Her voice cracked on the word daughter, and she pushed through it. "Is Gracie safe?" "Jacques, they're both being treated 20 yards from where we're standing," I said. "Brandon is not in this building. Pruitt has a unit outside the ER. Had one there since this morning," Pruitt confirmed. "Nobody comes through that entrance without us knowing." Maggie let out a breath that shook all the way through from start to finish, like a bridge in wind. Then something in her spine changed. I've watched it happen for 43 years, that moment when Maggie decides she is done being scared and starts being useful instead. Her shoulders came back. Her chin came up. She loosened her grip on my hand, but didn't let go entirely. "What do you need from us?" she asked Pruitt. He looked at me. "I need Ray to make a phone call." "To Brandon," I said. "To Brandon." Pruitt set the evidence bag on the table and leaned forward slightly, the posture of a man laying out something important. "We have the audio recording. We have this text message which demonstrates consciousness of guilt. He knows what he did, and he knows we're closing in. We have Claire's testimony and the physical evidence from the house. What we don't have yet is Brandon saying anything directly incriminating in his own voice on a line we control." He paused. "If he does, and men who are panicking usually do, because they can't help themselves, it closes the last gap in the arrest warrant cleanly. No room for a defense attorney to maneuver." "I know that's a significant thing to ask," Pruitt added, and his voice had gone quieter, less detective, and more human. "Talking to him after everything today, I want you to know you can say no." "It's not hard," I said. "It needs doing." Maggie's hand tightened on mine again. "Ray." Just my name, said the way she's said it for 43 years when she's worried about me and doesn't want to say so directly. I turned to face her properly, took both her hands in mine. She was trembling fine and continuous the way a wire trembles under load, too much current running through something built for less. I held on firm and let her feel that I was steady. "Maggie." I waited until her eyes found mine. "They left our granddaughter under a bed for 5 days. She ate granola bars one at a time and crawled to the bathroom in the dark so she could drink from the faucet and not make noise. They locked our daughter in a concrete basement with a camping lantern and a padlock on the door and walked away." I kept my voice even, not cold, just certain. "Whatever Brandon says to me on that phone call, I can handle it. That is not the hard part of today." Her chin shook. Her eyes filled all the way and spilled over 2 tracks running down her cheeks that she didn't wipe away. Then she nodded once sharp, the way Maggie nods when she's made a decision and means it, and let go of my hands. Pruitt was already moving. He set a digital recorder on the table and pressed record, then pulled out his own phone and opened a second recording app as backup, positioning both devices where they'd catch the call clearly. 2 recordings, 2 devices, thorough, man." He looked at me and nodded. I picked up my phone. Brandon's name was still in my contacts, exactly where I'd put it 10 years ago, the night after he and Claire got engaged, when I'd driven home from dinner and sat in the driveway and made a deliberate decision to give the man a fair chance. I'd typed his name in as Brandon Clares and told myself that was enough reason. I looked at those 2 words on my screen for a moment. Then I pressed call. Maggie stood across the table from me, both hands pressed flat against the surface, eyes on my face. Pruitt stood to my left, completely still, watching the recorder. The line rang once, rang twice, and I made myself breathe slowly, made myself settle my shoulders the way I used to settle them before a difficult job, not tense, not braced, just present and ready, and I did what needed doing. Brandon picked up on the second ring. Ray. His voice was careful and flat, the particular flatness of a man who has rehearsed how much he's going to say and is holding everything else behind his back teeth. Not surprised I'd called. Ready for it. That told me something right there. Brandon. I kept my own voice easy the way I used to keep my hands loose and steady when I was working on a pressurized line. You don't grip too tight. You don't rush because one wrong move and the whole thing blows and you're dealing with something much worse than what you started with. I think we got off on the wrong foot this morning. I'm calling to clear the air. A pause. Just long enough. Clear the air, he repeated like he was tasting the phrase and deciding what it was made of. Claire and Gracie are at Wellstar Kennestone, I said. They're both being treated. They're going to be fine. I let that settle for a beat. I think there may have been a misunderstanding about what happened at the house. I'd like to hear your side of things. Across the table, Pruitt hadn't moved. Pen poised over his notebook, eyes on me, expression completely neutral. Maggie was standing against the wall by the door. I'd asked her to stay. She'd agreed without argument. And she was doing what she always does when she's frightened and determined at the same time, standing very still, arms at her sides, watching me work. The silence on Brandon's end stretched out long enough that I could hear him breathing. I could almost hear him calculating, running the numbers, measuring what I knew against what he thought I knew, trying to find the gap. I don't think this is a conversation we should be having without my attorney present, he said finally. Your attorney, I said. For a misunderstanding. Ray. Shaw. Claire told me about the basement, Brandon. I kept my voice quiet. No heat, no accusation, just a fact set down flat on a table between two men. She told me about the transfer papers. She told me about the padlock and about Wednesday night. Another pause. Longer. When he spoke again, the careful flatness had developed a crack in it, something with more heat bleeding through the edges. Claire is not in a stable state of mind right now. She's been under significant stress for months, and she has a tendency to misread situations, dramatize them. I found the padlock, I said. I still have it. It's a master lock hardened shackle, brand new. I know what a brand new padlock looks like, Brandon. I also found the water meter running in a house you told me was completely empty. I paused. And I found your daughter under her bed. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 5 days. She'd been drinking water from the bathroom faucet in the dark because she was afraid to turn the lights on. Geez, that is not. He cut himself off, started over. Gracie was supposed to be at my mother's in Savannah. If she was in that house, that was Claire's doing, not mine. Claire must have told her to stay. Pruitt wrote something in his notebook, underlined it twice, slowly, with purpose. Your mother's in Savannah, I said. I can call her right now from this phone while you're on the line and ask her whether she's seen Gracie at any point this week. Would that be helpful? 4 full seconds of dead air. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to talk to my lawyer, Brandon said. His voice had gone flat again, all that heat pulled back and buttoned down. I'm not saying anything else to you, Ray. This conversation is over. One more thing, I said. I said the conversation is, who is Paul? The silence that came after that question was a completely different animal from the calculating silences that had come before it. Those had been the silence of a man managing his words carefully. This was the silence of a man who has just stepped onto ground he didn't know was there and felt it shift. When he spoke, his voice had moved up slightly in pitch, a fraction barely perceptible, the specific involuntary change that happens when the words a person is saying and the truth a person knows are pointed in opposite directions. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. You called me Paul twice, I said. Sunday night when I first called about Claire, and again yesterday morning when I called from my driveway. I've been your father-in-law for 10 years. You've sat at my kitchen table. You know my name as well as you know your own. I let a breath out slowly through my nose. So I'm curious, who is Paul? The line went dead. I set my phone down on the table. My hands were completely steady. I was mildly surprised by that. And then I wasn't 40 years of working with pressurized systems teaches you that the moment to be steady is exactly the moment when everything is at its most volatile. You don't get to fall apart until the valve is closed and the pressure is off. Pruitt set his pen down and looked at me across the table. On a less composed man, the expression might have been called satisfaction. On Pruitt, it was simply the look of a man whose work was going well. That last part, he said. The name, that wasn't in our plan. No, I agreed. He didn't answer it. No, I said. He didn't. Pruitt picked up his own phone and made a call, turning slightly away from me. His voice dropping into the clipped, compressed shorthand of law enforcement, the way people talk when they've had the same kind of conversation. Enough times that they've stripped it down to the essential load-bearing words. I caught fragments. Warrant, Birchwood Lane, Foster B. Rolling. Then he was done and turning back. We're running his credit cards, Pruitt said. Every card connected to his name or any known alias. If he uses one anywhere in the metro area, we'll have a location inside 20 minutes. He set the phone down. A man who spent months planning something just watched it fall apart in a single morning. People in that position make poor decisions. They act on instinct instead of strategy, and instinct leaves tracks. He paused, looked at me directly. You did well on that call? Very well. My 40 years of telling homeowners their pipes were worse than they thought. I said. You learn to stay calm when the other person isn't. Maggie made a sound from her place by the door, not quite a laugh, but the closest thing to one she'd managed all day. I looked over at her. Some of the color had come back into her face. Pruitt almost smiled. Almost. 17 minutes later, his phone rang. He listened for 40 seconds without speaking, said thank you, and ended the call. He looked at me. Brandon just used his Visa card at a gas station on Highway 41 11 miles north of here, he said. Units are on their way. I sat back in the chair and felt something loosen in my chest. Not all the way, not completely, but enough. The specific loosening that comes when a man has done what he came to do and can now allow the larger machinery to take over. I'd been a plumber for 40 years. I knew how to fix what was broken. I also knew that some systems were too big for one person, and you had to hand off to people with the right tools. This was that moment. Tara, I asked, if she's with him, they'll both be picked up at the same time, Pruitt said. If not, she's already on our radar from the recording. She won't get far. He closed his notebook with a clean, final sound. Mr. Caldwell, go be with your family. Claire and Gracie need you more than I do right now. The moment we have Brandon in custody, you'll hear from me directly. I stood up. My knees reminded me with considerable enthusiasm that I had dropped them onto a concrete basement floor approximately 4 hours ago. I put one hand on the wall for a moment and breathed. Ray. Pruitt used my first name for the first time, and something in his voice had come down a register, less the detective, more the man. The fact that you drove up this morning instead of waiting one more day. He stopped, started again. It mattered. What you did today, it made the difference. I nodded because my voice was not going to be reliable if I tried to use it right then. Maggie crossed the room and took my arm, and we walked back down the hallway together toward Claire's room. I didn't let myself think about 3 more days, about 1 day later, about any version of this morning where I'd told myself to wait and see. Not yet. My daughter and my granddaughter were 20 yards away. That was the only number that mattered. Claire was sitting up in bed when I got back to her room. The IV line was still in her arm, a bag of saline dripping slow and steady into her vein, but the color had come back into her face, not all of it. Not the full warmth I was used to seeing, but enough that she looked less like a photograph of herself and more like the actual person. Gracie was asleep in the chair beside the bed, curled sideways with her knees tucked up a heated blanket pulled to her chin by some thoughtful nurse. Her mouth was slightly open, and her breathing was deep and even, and she was holding the edge of Claire's blanket in one small fist, even in sleep, like she needed the physical connection to stay sure that her mother was still there. Maggie was on Claire's other side, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched, talking softly. She looked up when I came in, and the relief on her face at seeing me walk through the door, normal and upright and unharmed, hit me somewhere behind the sternum. "Brandon?" Claire asked immediately, her eyes finding mine. "Cobb County has units looking for him right now," I said. "He used his credit card 40 minutes ago. They'll have him soon." Claire closed her eyes for a moment. Her jaw worked. Then she opened them again and said, "Good," in a voice that was very quiet and very steady and cost her something to produce. I pulled the second chair close to her bed and sat down. Maggie reached across and put her hand over mine on the armrest. The 3 of us stayed like that for a moment, our granddaughter asleep, our daughter breathing carefully, the monitors beeping their soft reassurance. Then Claire said, "Dad, there are things you need to know about how long this has been building." She paused, glancing at Gracie to confirm she was still asleep. "I need to tell someone, and I need it to be you." "Tell me," I said. She did. She talked for 40 minutes. Her voice low, and even occasionally dropping to a near whisper when emotion overtook the steadiness she was working so hard to maintain. Brandon had started changing 18 months ago, gradually enough that she'd explained it away to herself each time the way you do when you love someone and want the thing you see to be something other than what it is. Coming home later and later. Keeping his phone face down on every surface. Money disappearing from the joint account in amounts too small to be dramatic, but too consistent to be accidental. I started keeping a notebook," Claire said. "Writing down the dates and amounts. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just needed to make it real on paper." She looked at her hands. 6 months ago, I found a text on his phone. I wasn't snooping, he left it open on the counter and I picked it up thinking it was mine. It was from a woman named Tara. It said things that couldn't be misread. Maggie made a sound low in her throat, her hand tightening on mine. When I confronted him, Claire continued. That was a mistake. After that, he stopped trying to hide things and started controlling things instead. What I spent who I talked to when I came home from school. He told me if I filed for divorce, he'd take Gracie. That the courts favor fathers now, and he could make me look unstable. She let out a slow breath. I was scared enough to believe him. A knock came at the door. I looked up. The woman in the doorway was about Claire's age. Dark hair pulled back, wearing a Pine Ridge Elementary lanyard still around her neck, like she'd come straight from school without stopping to take it off. Her eyes went to Claire, and immediately filled, and she pressed one hand flat over her mouth. "Oh, Claire," She said the words coming out wrecked and small. Linda. Claire reached out her free hand. Linda Marsh crossed the room in 4 steps and took Claire's hand in both of hers, bending down to press her forehead briefly against their joined knuckles, and her shoulders shook once hard before she pulled herself back together. "I should have pushed harder," Linda said, her voice thick. "When you told me about the money, I should have pushed you to go to someone. I kept thinking you'd tell me when you were ready, and I just—" She stopped, jaw tight. "You couldn't have known," Claire said firmly. "Linda, look at me. You couldn't have known." Linda straightened up and turned to me, wiping her eyes with the back of her wrist. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm Linda Marsh. I teach 3rd grade at Pine Ridge. Claire is my best friend, and I should have done more, and I'm so sorry." "You're here now," I said. "That matters." Linda nodded, pulling herself together with visible effort. She sat in the chair Maggie had vacated. "There's something I need to tell you both. Something that's been sitting on me since last week." She looked at Claire. "You remember you showed me the bank statements in September, the ones where the money was disappearing?" "Yes," Claire said. "I kept a copy on my phone," Linda said. "I photographed them when you weren't looking because I was worried and I didn't know what else to do." She pulled out her phone, opened her photos, and turned it toward me. Rows of transactions highlighted in yellow dates going back 14 months. Transfers to an account labeled FH Holdings in amounts ranging from $800 to $4,500, recurring like clockwork. I didn't know if it meant anything, but I kept it. I looked at the numbers on Linda's phone screen and felt the pieces clicking into place. $43,000 moved out of Claire's household account into something called FH Holdings over 14 months. Foster Holdings. The same shell account Pruitt had found. "Linda," I said, "Detective Pruitt needs to see this." Linda's chin went up, decisive. "Whatever he needs. Whatever helps." She looked at Claire. "One more thing. Last Tuesday, a man came to Pine Ridge asking about you. Said he was from the district office doing a routine wellness check on absent teachers. The principal thought it was strange because nobody from the district called ahead." Linda's eyes hardened. "He asked specifically whether anyone had tried to contact you or file a welfare check. Then he left." Claire looked at me. I looked back at her. Brandon had sent someone to the school to find out if anyone was looking. A week ago, he had been watching every angle, checking every door, making sure the walls he'd built around Claire were holding. He had no idea I was already on my way. My phone rang at 7:43 the next morning. I'd spent the night in the hospital. There was a family waiting room 2 doors down from Claire's room, with a couch the color of old mustard, and I'd folded myself onto it sometime around 2 in the morning and slept in 3-hour pieces, jerking awake every time a cart rolled past in the hallway. Maggie had gone home at midnight to sleep properly and come back at 6 with a thermos of real coffee and 2 blueberry muffins from the gas station on Barrett Parkway, which was the most thoughtful thing anyone had done for me in recent memory. I was on my 2nd cup when Pruitt's name came up on my screen. "They've got him," Pruitt said before I could speak. "Brandon Foster was taken into custody last night at 10:52 at a budget inn off I-75 in Marietta. Tara Weston was with him." I set the coffee cup down on the waiting room table very carefully because my hand had started shaking again and I didn't want to spill it. "Both of them. Well, both of them. Brandon is being processed now. He asked for his attorney the moment the cuffs went on and hasn't said a word since, which is his right." Pruitt paused. "Tara, however, is a different story entirely." "She talked," I said. "Or she hasn't stopped," Pruitt said. "Mr. Caldwell, I've been doing this job for 19 years. I have never seen anyone come apart that fast or that completely. The arresting officers said she was crying before they even got the cuffs on her. By the time they got her to the station, she was shaking so hard they had to get her water before she could speak. She waived her right to an attorney, which I will tell you is unusual, and which her future public defender is going to have a lot of feelings about. And she talked for 3 hours straight. Through the doorway of the waiting room, I could see the hallway leading to Claire's room. Maggie had gone in 20 minutes ago with the muffins. I could hear faintly Gracie's voice, not the words, just the cadence of it, the particular bright rise and fall of a 9-year-old talking about something that interested her. Whatever that child had survived, it had not taken her voice. "What did Tara say?" I asked. Pruitt walked me through it. Brandon had approached Tara 8 months ago, not at the realty office where they both worked, but at a bar in Buckhead, where she'd gone after a hard week, and he'd found her, which in retrospect Tara said should have told her everything she needed to know about how he operated. He'd been charming, attentive, full of stories about a marriage that had turned cold and a wife who didn't understand him. Tara had been lonely and in debt from a combination of poor decisions she was too embarrassed to detail. And Brandon had seemed like someone who had answers. She said she didn't know about the plan to confine Claire until 2 days before it happened. Pruitt told me. Brandon framed it as temporary. He said he needed Claire to sign some papers that Claire was being irrational and difficult, and that once she signed, everything would move quickly and cleanly. Tara said she told herself it was just a couple of days. "She was in the house," I said. "She heard Claire from the basement." "Yes." She said that was when she understood it wasn't going to be clean. Pruitt's voice was even professional, but there was something underneath it, not sympathy exactly. More like the bone-tiredness of a man who has heard too many variations of the same story. She said she tried to convince Brandon to let Claire go that second night. He told her to stop being emotional and think about what they stood to gain. I thought about Tara's voice on that recording. The way she'd said she has a little girl, Brandon. The way he'd answered her as if Gracie was a scheduling inconvenience. "There's one more thing," Pruitt said. "And I want to prepare you for it because it's difficult to hear." "Tell me," I said. Tara stated that approximately 4 days into the confinement, Brandon told her that if Claire continued to refuse to sign, he intended to move her to a storage unit outside Kennesaw and report her as a missing person. He told Tara that by the time anyone found anything, they would be out of state, and the house sale would already be in escrow. Pruitt paused. He also said, and I'm quoting directly from Tara's statement here, he said, "Dead women don't fight for custody." The waiting room went very quiet. The mustard-colored couch, the vending machine humming in the corner, the fluorescent light flickering slightly overhead, all of it sharpened into focus, the way things do when the world hands you something too large to process all at once. "He was going to kill her," I said. My voice came out flat and strange, like it was coming from somewhere outside my body. "Jakun." Based on Tara's statement and the timeline established by the recording, the DA is filing attempted murder in addition to kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment, Pruitt said. Tara will be charged as an accessory. Her cooperation will be considered at sentencing. He paused again. "Mr. Caldwell, you got there Monday morning. Brandon planned to move Claire Wednesday night. You had a 48-hour window. 2 days. I'd had 2 days to spare. I pressed the phone hard against my ear and stared at the fluorescent light on the ceiling and breathed in and out, slow and deliberate, until I was confident my voice would work correctly. "Thank you, Detective," I said, "for everything." "Thank your granddaughter," Pruitt said quietly. "That recording is what made this airtight." I stood up from the mustard couch, picked up my coffee, and walked down the hallway toward Claire's room. Through the small window in the door, I could see Maggie perched on the edge of Claire's bed and Gracie sitting cross-legged at the foot of it, gesturing with both hands about something, her face animated and alive. Claire was watching her daughter with an expression I didn't have adequate words for, something between devastation and gratitude. The face of a woman who understands exactly what she almost lost and is choosing minute by minute to be present for what she still has. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Grandpa Ray." Gracie looked up and patted the blanket beside her with enormous authority. "Come sit. I was telling Mom about the book I've been reading. Under the bed. I had it with me the whole time." I sat down on the bed next to my granddaughter, and she leaned against my arm, immediately warm and solid and real, and I put my hand on the top of her head and thought 48 hours and did not say it out loud. The doctor cleared Gracie for discharge late that afternoon. Her blood work had come back clean. Her hydration levels were back to normal, and the pediatric nurse, a cheerful woman named Ms. Patterson, who had apparently made it her personal mission to ensure Gracie left the hospital with the highest possible opinion of medical care, presented her with a stuffed bear wearing a tiny Wellstar badge on its scrub's pocket. Gracie named him Detective Bear on the spot and informed us he would be assisting with future investigations, which made Claire laugh a real laugh. Sudden and unguarded, the first one I'd heard from her since before any of this began, and the sound of it hit me somewhere so deep I had to look at the ceiling for a moment. We weren't going anywhere yet. Claire needed one more night for monitoring, and none of us had any intention of splitting up. Maggie had driven home that morning and come back with an overnight bag for herself and a change of clothes for me. And somewhere between noon and 3 in the afternoon, our little cluster in room 214 had acquired 2 extra chairs, a box of Cheez-Its from the vending machine, and a Uno deck that Linda had brought when she came back for a second visit. It was Linda who stepped out around 4 o'clock, taking Maggie with her to find decent coffee from the cafe on the ground floor. And it was in that quieter moment, just me and Claire and Gracie, the monitors beeping their steady reassurance. Detective Bear propped against the pillow, that Gracie looked up from the Uno deck she'd been shuffling and said, "Grandpa Ray, can I tell you what it was like under the bed?" Claire went very still. She looked at Gracie carefully. "You don't have to, baby." "I want to," Gracie said. She said it the way 9-year-olds say things they've decided completely without negotiation. "I've been thinking about it, and I want to say it out loud so it stops feeling so big inside my head." I set down the card I'd been holding. "Then we're listening, sweetheart." Gracie took a breath. She set the Uno deck on the blanket in a neat stack and folded her hands on top of it, and the gesture was so adult, so composed, that it made my chest ache in a particular way I hadn't expected. "Wednesday night I was reading in bed," she said. "The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, number 7. I had my reading lamp on and my door was open a little bit because I don't like it all the way closed." She paused. "Then I heard them downstairs, Dad and a woman. Could you hear what they were saying?" I asked gently. "At first, just that they were loud. And then Dad's voice got really loud, and the woman's voice got scared sounding, and then I heard Mom." Gracie's hands tightened on the Uno deck. Her voice stayed steady, but something in her eyes changed, deepened. "Mom was crying. Not like when you stub your toe. The other kind." Claire made a sound, small, involuntary. She pressed her fingers over her lips. "Mom told me things," Gracie continued. "Not about what happened. She didn't know it was going to happen exactly like that. But she told me, she said sometimes grown-ups have really bad arguments, and if I ever heard Daddy yelling really loud, and it sounded scary, I should go straight under my bed and stay there and not come out until someone I trusted completely came and called my name. Gracie looked at me. She said Grandpa Ray would come. She said if something really bad happened, and she couldn't call you herself, she said, you would figure it out. She said you always do. Something in the back of my throat went hot and tight. I kept my face as still as I could manage. So I got under the bed, Gracie said. I took my book and my tablet and the emergency granola bars Mom put in my nightstand drawer. There were 4 of them, and I ate one a day. And on the 4th day, I ate only half because I wasn't sure how long I'd have to stay. She looked at me with an expression of absolute pragmatic seriousness. I was trying to make them last. That was very smart, I said. My voice came out rough around the edges. On the 3rd day, I was really thirsty, Gracie continued. I waited until it was really late at night and the house was quiet, and I crawled out to the bathroom in the dark and drank from the faucet and filled up my water bottle. Then I went back under the bed. She paused. I did that every night. I didn't turn any lights on. Claire had stopped trying to hold herself together. Tears were running silently down her face, but she kept her lips pressed firm, kept her eyes on Gracie, kept herself present for her daughter's telling of this. I recorded things on my tablet, Gracie said, because I kept thinking Grandpa Ray is going to want to know everything that happened, and I might forget or get confused or maybe nobody would believe me. So I just kept recording whenever I heard voices. She tilted her head. Was that okay? Was it helpful? Gracie. I leaned forward and took both her hands in mine, the Uno deck scattering sideways across the blanket. My voice was not doing what I needed it to do anymore, and I stopped trying to control it. What you did was the bravest thing I have ever seen, in 67 years of living. That is the bravest thing. Her face crumpled all at once. Not the composed, deliberate face she'd been wearing for the last 10 minutes, but the real one underneath the 9-year-old face, the one that had been scared and alone for 5 days and was only now allowing itself to feel all of it. I really wanted to come out, she said, her voice breaking into pieces. On day 3, I really wanted to just come out. But Mom said wait for Grandpa Ray, and I didn't want to mess it up. I pulled her into my arms and held her, and she cried the way she had when I'd found her under the bed completely, with her whole body, nothing held back. Claire reached across and put her hand on Gracie's back, and I put my arm around Claire's shoulders, and the 3 of us stayed like that, while Gracie cried herself through it and out the other side. After a while, Gracie lifted her head from my shoulder and looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and a tear-tracked face and said, "Grandpa, you were only 1 day late." I couldn't speak. I just held her tighter. "Mom said you'd come," Gracie said. "And you came." Maggie came back with the coffee at 4:15. She stopped in the doorway when she saw the 3 of us, me with Gracie still tucked against my side, Claire, watching us both with red-rimmed eyes and wet cheeks, and she read the room the way she's always been able to read a room in about 1.5 seconds, and she set the coffee cups quietly on the windowsill and came and sat on the edge of the bed without asking any questions or saying a word. That's 43 years of marriage. You learn when to speak and when to simply be present. Linda appeared behind her, took one look, murmured something about giving us some time, and pulled the door shut from the outside. I made a mental note to thank her properly when this was all over. Gracie had cried herself into a state of heavy, boneless exhaustion. She was listing sideways against my arm, eyelids drooping, Detective Bear clutched to her chest. Within 10 minutes, she was asleep again. Children have the merciful ability to find rest in the middle of chaos that adults lose somewhere along the way. Claire watched her daughter sleep for a long moment. Then she looked at me. "I need to tell you why I didn't call you," she said. Her voice was quiet but direct, the way she'd spoken as a child when she'd done something she knew needed owning up to. Before you ask, before you wonder. I wasn't going to ask, I said. You were going to wonder, though. The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. I know you, Dad. Maggie reached over and took Claire's hand without speaking. Claire looked down at their joined hands for a moment. Then she began. It didn't start with something I could point to, she said. That's what I kept telling myself every time I thought about calling you. I kept waiting for the moment that was clear enough, bad enough, obvious enough to justify picking up the phone and saying something is really wrong. She paused. And by the time things were bad enough, I was already so deep inside it that I couldn't see the edges anymore. How long? Maggie asked softly. The control stuff, about 2 years. Claire's jaw tightened slightly. It started small. He didn't like it when I made plans with Linda without mentioning it first. He wanted to know where I was going when I'd be back, who I'd be with. I told myself it was because he cared. Because he was anxious. I made excuses for it the way you make excuses for a leak you don't want to deal with. She glanced at me. I know you'd have a better word for that. Deferred maintenance, I said. Deferred maintenance, she repeated. Exactly. Every time I deferred it, it got a little worse. By the time I understood what was actually happening, I'd already accepted so many small things that the larger thing felt normal, or at least familiar, which is almost the same as normal when you've been living inside it long enough. Her voice was steady, measured, but her free hand was pressed flat against the blanket fingers spread, and I could see the tension in her forearm. Maggie's thumb moved in small circles on the back of Claire's hand. He said things, Claire continued, about you. Both of you. She looked at her lap. He said if I told you what was happening at home, you'd think I'd failed, that you'd be disappointed in me for picking the wrong person and sticking with it so long. He said Mom would worry herself sick, and it would be my fault. She exhaled. I knew those things weren't true, but he said them often enough, and by the time he said them I was already tired enough, and somehow tired, plus often enough starts to feel like logic. Maggie made a sound that was not quite a word. Her hand on Claire's tightened. I want to be very clear about one thing, Claire said, and her voice gained a firmer edge. I never doubted that you would come if I asked. Not for a single second. I knew you'd get in that truck and drive up the minute I said the word. She looked directly at me. That's not why I didn't call. I didn't call because I had convinced myself I should be able to handle it on my own. That asking for help meant I'd failed at something. I thought about 40 years of crawling under houses, tracing leaks to their source. The number of times a homeowner had called me embarrassed, apologetic, certain they should have been able to fix it themselves. The number of times the thing they'd been trying to manage alone had turned into something far worse, because they'd waited. Claire, I said. She looked at me. But a pipe under pressure doesn't fail because it's weak, I said. It fails because the pressure is too high. That's not the pipe's fault. That's never been the pipe's fault. Her face crumpled not all the way, not like Gracie's total collapse, but in the careful, controlled way of a woman who has been holding herself together through sheer discipline and is allowing a single crack in the surface, just one, just enough. I should have called you so much sooner, she said. I wasted so much time being ashamed of something that wasn't mine to be ashamed of. You're calling me now, I said. That's what matters. Maggie leaned forward and wrapped both arms around Claire, and Claire dropped her head onto her mother's shoulder and breathed, just breathed, deep and deliberate, the specific breathing of someone learning to take up space again after a long time of making themselves small. We stayed like that for a while. Gracie slept through all of it, her small chest rising and falling, Detective Bear standing guard. Then a knock came at the door. Pruitt. He looked at the room and immediately read it the same way Maggie had. "I can come back," he said. "No." Claire lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was firm. "Tell us what you have." Pruitt glanced at me. "I need Ray to come to the station this afternoon. There's financial documentation I want you to see in person." He paused. "It explains everything about why Brandon did this. All of it. Down to the dollar." Claire reached out and gripped my wrist. "Go," she said. "Maggie's here. Gracie's here. Go find out everything and then come back and tell me all of it." I covered her hand with mine for a moment. Then I stood up, kissed Maggie on the top of her head, looked once more at Gracie sleeping with her detective bear, and followed Pruitt out into the hallway. Pruitt's workspace at the Cobb County precinct was not what I'd expected. I'd pictured something from television-cluttered desk evidence boards, covered in photographs, and string the general atmosphere of barely managed chaos. What I got was a clean laminate desk, 2 monitors, a family photo of Pruitt, with 2 teenage boys and a yellow Labrador, and a very organized stack of printed documents in a manila folder with Brandon Foster's name written on the tab in neat block letters. Pruitt poured 2 cups of coffee from a machine in the break room, without asking if I wanted one, and set one in front of me. I appreciated that. I was on my 4th cup of the day, and my hands had finally stopped shaking, and I wasn't about to stop now. He opened the manila folder and laid the documents out across the desk in a sequence left to right, like he was telling a story with paper. "Foster Holdings, LLC," he said, tapping the first sheet. "Brandon registered this as a limited liability company in Delaware 8 months ago. Delaware, because the disclosure requirements are minimal, a lot of people use it specifically because it's harder to trace." He looked at me to make sure I was following. He then opened a business checking account in Georgia under that name. This is where the money from the joint account was going. I looked at the bank statements, the same transfers Linda had photographed on Claire's phone, but now with the receiving account clearly identified. $43,200 over 14 months, moved in increments small enough to avoid automatic fraud flags. "The house," I said. "The house," Pruitt confirmed. He laid the next document in front of me. A property transfer form for 224 Birchwood Lane. Claire's signature at the bottom, dated 3 weeks ago. Forensic document examiner confirmed this morning the signature is forged. Brandon used a signed check of Claire's to trace the signature and replicate it on the transfer form. The buyer was a real estate investment company. Closing was set for November 15th. I stared at Claire's name on that form. Her handwriting, or something close enough to it to fool a closing agent who'd never met her, authorizing the sale of the house where Gracie had grown up, where Claire had planted yellow mums in the window box every October, where I had installed shower heads and fixed leaks and spent Sunday afternoons being a father. "How much?" I asked. $380,000. After the mortgage payoff, Brandon would have cleared approximately $160,000 in cash. Pruitt tapped the next sheet. Combined with the $43,000 already in Foster Holdings, he'd have been leaving Georgia with just over $200,000 and no traceable connection to Claire or the property. "And Tara's debts," I said. $68,000 in personal debt between credit cards and a personal loan from 2 years ago. Brandon had promised to clear those from the proceeds. Pruitt leaned back in his chair. He'd positioned himself as the solution to her problems, which made her willing to overlook things she shouldn't have overlooked. I thought about the recording. Tara's voice saying she has a little girl, Brandon, The way she'd known it was wrong and done it anyway, because she'd needed to believe the version of the story he'd given her. What happens to her? I asked. No conticu. Accessory to kidnapping. Accessory to unlawful imprisonment. The DA is considering the attempted murder accessory charge depending on how directly she can be tied to the planning of the later stages. Pruitt was straight with me, which I respected. Her cooperation is significant. It'll be taken into account. I nodded. Looked at the documents spread across the desk. 14 months of planning. A shell company, a forged signature, a buyer already lined up. Brandon hadn't snapped under pressure or made a desperate decision in a bad moment. He had sat across from Claire at their kitchen table for over a year, eating her cooking, watching their daughter do homework, and simultaneously building the architecture of her disappearance. The name, I said. Paul. Brandon kept calling me Paul. Pruitt almost smiled. Paul Whitfield, Brandon's attorney. He'd been on the phone with him 3 times the day you drove up to Marietta. By the time you called him that morning, his brain had the wrong name loaded. He paused. Panicking men make small mistakes. Sometimes those small mistakes are what breaks a case open. I sat with that for a moment. Then I stood up, shook Pruitt's hand firmly, and walked out to the parking lot. The late afternoon sun hit me full in the face when I pushed through the precinct doors, warm for October, the kind of Georgia afternoon that makes you remember why people choose to live here. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment with my keys in my hand. On the drive back to the hospital on Whitlock Avenue, I stopped at a red light. In the crosswalk in front of me, a man was walking hand in hand with a little girl of about 6, her other hand swinging a plastic pumpkin bucket, Halloween candy rattling inside. The man said something I couldn't hear, and the little girl threw her head back and laughed with her whole body. I thought of Claire at 6 years old asking me why water takes the path of least resistance, because it always finds a way through, I'd told her, no matter what's in its way. My eyes burned. I pressed the heel of my hand hard against them and kept it there until the light turned green. Then I drove back to my family. 3 months is both a long time and no time at all. It's long enough for a 9-year-old to stop flinching at loud voices in the grocery store. Long enough for a 35-year-old woman to start sleeping without the light on. Long enough for 2 old people to rearrange their house around the specific gravity of the people they love most, and find to their surprise that the house fits better this way than it ever did before. It's not long enough to stop missing the life that should have been, but you learn slowly to carry that alongside the life that is. Claire and Gracie moved into the spare bedroom at Sycamore Court, 2 weeks after the hospital. We painted it together on a Saturday in November. Gracie chose the color a soft blue she called the inside of a swimming pool, and she was so serious about the trim work that I gave her her own brush and let her do the baseboards herself. She got paint on her elbow and on the tip of her nose and on the left knee of her jeans, and she didn't notice any of it because she was too busy concentrating tongue between her teeth, painting each stroke like it mattered enormously. It did matter. That was the thing. Every ordinary thing mattered enormously now. Maggie taught Gracie to bake on Saturday mornings. Not just watching, actually doing it, hands in the dough, measuring cups and everything. Gracie turned out to have strong opinions about the ratio of brown sugar to white in a peach cobbler, which led to a very serious negotiation between her and Maggie that lasted 20 minutes and ended in a compromise both parties were satisfied with. I sat at the kitchen table and drank my coffee and listened to them argue about sugar and thought, this is what a house is supposed to sound like. Claire went back to Pine Ridge in January. The school had kept her position. The principal, a woman named Mrs. Okafor, had called Claire personally in November and said the job was hers whenever she was ready, no pressure, no timeline. Claire's students made a banner. 32 fourth graders with markers and poster board, and approximately 0 artistic restraint. The banner reading, "Welcome back, Mrs. Foster," in letters of varying sizes and a remarkable number of hand-drawn dogs that had no clear connection to the sentiment, but appeared to have been added enthusiastically nonetheless. Claire called me that first evening after school, and her voice was different, lighter, like something that had been wound too tight for too long had finally been allowed to loosen one full turn. "Good day," I asked. "Marcus Chen cried when I walked in," she said. "He's 9 years old and he cried and then immediately looked furious about it and pretended he had something in his eye." "Smart kid," I said. "The smartest," she said. And she laughed, the real one, the full one, the one I'd heard for the first time in that hospital room when Ms. Patterson gave Gracie the bear. Brandon's case was proceeding through the courts. I won't spend much time on that here because it is not the part of this story that matters most to me. What I will say is that Pruitt called me in December with an update, and when he finished telling me what the charges looked like and what the likely timeline was, he said, "Mr. Caldwell, I want you to know in 19 years I have never seen a case turn on a child's tablet recording before. Gracie's instinct to document everything is going to matter for a very long time." I told Gracie that. She listened very seriously, nodded once, and said, "I'm going to be a detective when I grow up, or possibly a marine biologist. I haven't decided." Detective Bear remained on her pillow every night either way. On a Thursday afternoon in January, I was in the garage when Gracie appeared in the doorway in her school clothes backpack, still on watching me work on a leaking outdoor faucet I'd been meaning to get to for 2 weeks. "Can I help?" she asked. "Pull up that stool," I said. She dragged the wooden stool over and climbed up and watched me with the focused attention of someone who intends to understand rather than just observe. I showed her how to shut off the supply valve first. Always shut off the supply valve first. That's rule 1, that's always rule 1. I showed her the worn washer that was causing the leak, held it up, so she could see the compression ring that had gone soft with age. That tiny thing was making all that water leak," she said. "Tiny things cause the biggest problems," I said. "And they're usually the easiest to fix once you know where to look." She turned the old washer over in her fingers, examining it from every angle. "Grandpa, is that what happened with Dad? He had something worn out inside him and nobody fixed it in time." I looked at my granddaughter, 9 years old, backpack still on old washer in her fingers, asking me a question that most adults spend a lifetime avoiding. "Something like that," I said carefully. "Except a worn washer doesn't choose to leak. Your dad made choices. That's different." She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Then she handed the washer back. "Can I put the new one in?" "That's why I pulled up the stool," I said. She grinned wide, and sudden the grin that was all Claire at 8 years old with my hard hat on her head, and reached for the new washer with both hands. That Sunday at 7 o'clock in the evening, my phone rang. I was in my recliner. Maggie was in the kitchen. Claire and Gracie were on the couch, 12 feet away from me, Gracie in pajamas. Claire with a mug of tea, both of them watching something on the laptop between them. The screen on my phone said Claire. I looked up. Claire was holding her phone out toward me from the couch, grinning. "Answer it, Dad," she said. I answered it. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hey, Dad," Claire's voice said through the speaker, and Gracie immediately dissolved into giggles and grabbed for the phone. "Just calling to check in." Maggie appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in her hands, and looked at me across the living room. Her eyes were bright. The Sunday call had come back. Not from 2.5 hours away, from 12 feet. But it had come back. And in this house on this evening in January of 2025, that was everything. People ask me what I learned from all of this. From the longest week of my life from the basement and the gamjuong and the 47 minutes on a cracked tablet screen. Here is what I know now that I didn't know then. I believed that love meant not interfering, that a good father steps back, gives space, trusts his child to handle her own life. What I understand now is that there is a difference between giving someone space and leaving them alone in the dark. I waited too long. I saw the signs, the tight voice, the pulled sleeve, the eyes that didn't quite meet mine, and I told myself I was being overprotective. Don't be like me. If something feels wrong about the person your child loves, say something. Ask the hard question. Make the uncomfortable phone call. Do it now, not later. Later has a way of becoming too late. I believe that God put Raymond Caldwell in that house on that Monday morning for a reason. Not because I am special, because a 9-year-old girl was counting on a promise her mother had made, and some promises are too important to break. That is not coincidence. That is grace. My personal opinion, for whatever it is worth, from a retired plumber in Cartersville, Georgia, family revenge is not about anger. Real family revenge is showing up. It is driving 40 minutes on a Monday morning when everyone else is telling you everything is fine. It is trusting what you know over what you're told. Family revenge is refusing to let the people you love disappear quietly. If this story of family revenge reached something inside you, leave a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if these grandpa stories mean something to you, subscribe to this channel so our next revenge story finds its way to you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me until the very end of this grandpa stories journey. These stories contain some fictionalized elements created for the purpose of reflection and connection. If this type of content is not for you, there is no shame in stepping away and finding something that fits you better. But if you are still here, I am glad. I will see you in the next one.